Hi, everybody. Welcome to this live broadcast of Detransitioners, a European Tragedy.
When we are looking at the prominence of detransition and the risks of legal gender recognition based on self-determination, it is important to be mindful of information from UK Gender Identity Clinic, where we had only 0.47% detransition, so that's less than 0.5%. 50-year long-time study from Sweden, where it was 2% of the participants that have expressed regret following gender-affirming surgery.
Actually, I feel like I'm being erased little by little. It's like they're trying to sweep an uncomfortable truth under the rug because they can't face it, because it's a truth that makes people angry. It's distressing for someone who has experienced something like that, to the point where today you have a lot of people suffering from transitions because it's not something simple.
We have stories and testimonials of these people that just gone through transition and got to the point where they just stopped and realized that it was a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's like stupid because there are lots of detransitioners. I know about 20 women who are German speaking, who are detransitioners. And I also know international of people from Poland, from Czech Republic, from Italy, and then from all those English speaking countries. So there are a lot of detransitioners.
It's like you want to be blind. Yeah, I think it's just trying to ignore an issue that is clearly there.
Also the reasons when it comes to detransition or to regrets, because there is of course also social pressure and lack of support, which is often cited as the main reason, rather than really the feeling of having made a wrong decision.
No, that's not reality. I'm sorry, but today we're still living in a society where LGBT people are actually doing very well in our Western countries. They're very well protected, very well accepted. So when one says no, it means you were oppressed, it means you experienced transphobia. No, currently in our society, when someone dares to say something that goes against this somewhat trans, somewhat LGBT policy, they face harsh criticism, so I'm sorry, but no. We can't claim that someone who detransitioned did so because of state transphobia or because people around them were transphobic. No,
No, I actually didn't. I didn't experience any violence. For me, everything was fine. Just as I detransitioned, it was difficult to speak openly about it because then you're like the enemy for some trans activists, and it can be like really psychological challenging to have the issues with those people.
I don't really think that trans people that transition because of a violence or of a lack of support. I think that trans people have a lot of support. For me, it was really easier to transition than the transition. The transition, it was public, right? It was in public media and everywhere. So hate from the trans community was huge.
It's just not true. I mean, it's such a simplistic answer to such a complicated thing. The whole issue is just way complicated than is usually shown in the media, but also especially by trans activists. So I feel like it's just a very kind of simplistic answer to change the narrative so that it still fits their agenda or their beliefs.
Conversion practices, that is, therapies, pseudo-scientific and fraudulent interventions that aim at changing the sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression of LGBTIQ persons. Taking different forms: psychotherapy, medical interventions, faith-based interventions of whatever kind, relying on different practices such as electroshocks, physical violence, hormone and drug treatment, or exorcism. That is why the UN, the Council of Europe, and the European Parliament have been calling member states to counter such unacceptable practices and ban them.
In my experience, about 80 to 90% of people who detransition were individuals who felt uncomfortable in their own skin and really struggled with puberty. Their evolution within their bodies, they have not learned to know themselves, they have not learned to discover themselves as individuals. Unfortunately, nowadays we rush into things way too quickly. The moment someone says, I feel uncomfortable in my body, they're told, that's because you're not in my body. When I was little, I didn't like dresses, I didn't like skirts, I didn't like anything that fit the stereotype of a girl, I didn't like it at all. So naturally, when I finished middle school and started high school, people told me, oh, that's because you're a boy trapped in a girl's body. No, it's just that I didn't fit into the typical girl stereotype. But I was still completely a girl.
So it started like with the mastectomy because I had the surgery and I realized, okay, the surgery didn't help me anything. Now I just have like more bodily pain, but my psychological pain isn't like really better. So I already had like lots of doubts. And then I went back to the group and asked because of the pain I had and the mastectomy pain. And afterwards, they told me they sometimes also have mastectomy pain. So this was for me like a big lie. And then I decided to move out from Berlin to a small village to study there. And that for me helped a lot because Berlin for me was like really always stressful. And on the village, there was no stress anymore. And I realized I don't feel much sadness and everything. So I decided to stop also testosterone.
The main reason to the transition is the point in life when you just say to yourself that you cannot just mask yourself forever. You just need to accept yourself. You just cannot go through all the plastic surgeries and all the hormonal drugs just for nothing. For me, especially, it was really depressing phase of my life because being trans for me was just trying to be myself, but the exact opposite of who I am already, right? I'm not a woman. I'm just a modified boy, right? I felt like I'm a fraud. I cannot be a woman. I'm not. I can present myself as one, but I will never be one. I will just never be. It's just not possible. It's just not. But yes, my mental state got worse, much worse, and that was one of the main reasons I made the transition.
I think a lot of it is just part of growing up, honestly. Because when I started, I was late 18, 19. The treatment, they didn't really work and they didn't alleviate my distress. When I got older, I just, especially in your early 20s, you start to reflect on things like how you grew up, how, your parents, how that went. People that you've always had on a pedestal, you kind of start to break that down and you see things like everything is more nuanced, you start to reflect on a lot of things. So I guess that's what I did. And then I came to like insights that things that happened and how I actually felt and where that came from. And I started to understand that better. So I also started to understand more where these feelings came from that I wanted to be a woman.
There was a detransitioner from Belgium. She did research with 60 detransitioners for need and support, what detransitioners need as support needed. And all those detransitioners, they stated that the transition didn't help them. So they transitioned for a psychological reason. But after the transition, they realized they still have the same psychological issues. Well, it didn't help. Yeah, it was no problem with the family. It was no problem with the work background. But it simply was like it was not the right solution for them.
I was so uncomfortable in my body and completely ill at ease, plus my autism wasn't identified back then. My mother didn't even know what autism really was. So on top of being weird, not fitting into any box, being autistic without knowing it, not having many friends, not fitting into social groups, plus the bullying, plus spending all my days online, on forums, on Tumblr back then, on Facebook, all these little elements lined people up side by side that led me to transition. Well, socially, I was never really able to transition because my mom kept saying no. And fortunately, I transitioned socially. Physically, besides surgeries, people would call me sir or say my little guy. I transitioned because of all these little factors, but I only managed to identify these elements after a long time. after certain decisive events in my life that allowed me to work on myself and ask, but why? Why was I actually so uncomfortable in my own skin? Going through this phase surrounded by this really toxic environment made me think, well, yeah, this is actually the solution, when in reality it wasn't at all.
The main reasons was that I was soft. I was just playing with hair or just nails or just makeup because I liked my mom stuff, right? I was just watching just the makeup tutorials and I liked fashion. I like to dance. I've never had male friends. I always had female friends. Then I just came out as gay when I was 16. And then I just started to date my first guy. I felt like myself. I felt like I found myself, that I'm gay and I can do whatever I want. But then I really tried to be a liberal because I thought that that's something that I should do. Because when you're a part of the LGBT community, you really try to accept all of them. I was really trying to just be liberal and just accept even the trans people and non-binary people and just really feminine and just really masculine people, and I was just so okay with it. And then I found the videos on YouTube that just led me to think like, okay, I'm feminine and I'm depressed and I hate my body, so what should I do? And the trans stories was just telling the same symptoms as I had or just had, that they hate themselves, had depressions, were bullied, this stuff. And I thought that when I will transition, that these symptoms will go away and I will feel happy and I will be complete.
Well, I'm like more like a butch woman. I'm more like a masculine woman, and also all my hobbies are like the male hobbies, so called. I'm studying like electrotechnical engineering, and before I did like a apprenticeship for being an electrician, like a house electrician. Yeah, it always was a bit difficult. Like in the school, for example, I grew up in Bavaria, which is a bit more conservative. There, the pupils were like divided between females and males, and it wasn't like a social accepted to have like a male friends for a girl. And for me, that really got a big problem. Girls from the more upper class, they always told me like, I'm not behaving in the right way, I'm not moving in the right way, I should be more ladylike. And for me, that was like simply terrible. It was not my way of being. And also in my early teenage years, I realized I'm attracted also to women, and that really got me in a lot of trouble. And I guess these are the main reasons why I wanted to transition in the end, because I was like, if I hadn't been like also attracted to girls, I wouldn't have all those psychological issues that I later developed. So I maybe thought it would be like a solution to get better with my psychological status.
When I started identifying as trans, I was 16. I had a lot of problems accepting myself, my sexuality, but also just myself as a person, also my body, because puberty was changing my body, was doing all these things to my body that I hated, and I wanted to stop to it. I thought all these changes were disgusting. I felt I was really ugly. I was not really a popular kid in high school. I was bullied. I guess that's typical for boys of that age, that they just compete with each other all the time. And I did not do that. It felt like everywhere all the boys were doing it, and I had no idea how to escape that because I had no interest in that, and I just hated all of that. Also, I was gay, so I was not interested in girls at all. I mean, no one knew that, but so I was different. And of course, if you're different in such an environment, you're an easy target. A lot of people, especially the boys, were picking on me a lot of the time, and I just hated that. So I didn't really have a lot of close friends, especially not in high school. So I guess at the time I was just very lonely. And I think that it was mostly the loneliness that contributed to me wanting to be a woman.
No, people are not becoming more trans because there's a trend. Young people before used to commit suicides because they could not live their lives. They used to commit suicides because they were not accepted in society, because of people like the ECR who do not accept people who are different in this world.
Yes, completely. And not just by social media. I was also influenced by my friend group at the time because honestly, I never really had a friend group before. I have always dreamed of having a group of friends like all teens in middle school do. So when I got to high school and started having a group of friends, for me, it was a revolution. There was this influence from this friend group that was very different. And looking back, I think there were many autistic people among them, though none had been diagnosed. None of them were heterosexual or simply identified as a girl or boy. No, it was me saying I'm non-binary, I'm pansexual, I'm bisexual, etc. I knew nothing about any of this because my social media at the time was only focused on things I liked. Video games like Zelda or manga, romance manga specifically. I discovered all this entirely through this friend group, and gradually I thought to myself, this seems interesting, they seem to feel better in their bodies. So I started getting interested, and truly the more interested you got, the more social media would feed you suggestions like, check out this account, it's great, or look at this amazing image, especially on Tumblr, which was basically LGBT headquarters back then when I was in high school. And yes, it was this group that would say to me, are you sure you're like that? Are you sure? Look, you really do dress like a boy, though. At that time, I was just starting to discover myself as a woman. I was starting to wear dresses, tights, little boots. I had a handbag, and I liked myself. And I was thinking, wow, actually, I'm pretty. I look like the girls in the French movie LOL, which I watched a lot in middle school, and I thought, wow, so cool. But really, this group started saying to me, no, look, you can see it doesn't suit you. It's your mom who tells you to dress like that, which wasn't true at all. And I was so caught up in thinking, I finally have friends. I don't want to lose them. I thought, well, if they're my friends, they must only want what's best for me. I had this naive Care Bears view of life. For someone who is discovering it for the first time, let's be honest, young people are easily influenced since they know very little about the reality of our world. Someone who discovers and sees that there is a place on the internet where everyone appears benevolent and welcoming, 3/4 of them get fooled by this false impression. It's simply how things work in the online environment.
I thought, something is wrong in my life, something is wrong with me because this is happening to me and not to other people. So there must be something about myself. I never went to a therapist, but I diagnosed myself, by browsing the internet, trying to look for answers. Then at some day I found a trend that was a thing. And this was in 2014, 2015, when this whole explosion happened, really at the beginning. And then I found that and I thought, okay, this is it. On the internet, if you look at how do I know I'm trans, they provide you with a list. It's like a checklist. So I did that and I looked that up, and so many things I could just check. Like as a child, I always liked wearing dresses. I always liked makeup. And I'm talking about like a toddler, like 4 or 5 years old. With like role-playing games, I always wanted to have characters where I was a woman, like the mother or the aunt or the sister or whatever. If I think about it now, that's just, it's maybe not typical children behavior, but it's a child, It's very common. I've talked to a lot of gay men, and a lot of them, especially the older ones, they say they had the same thing. And a lot of them also say, if I was born your generation, if I was born nowadays, then I probably would have transitioned as a child.
It was heavily influenced by my girlfriend at the time, who was also trans. This whole transition was really influenced by this person. It was from the moment when she left me in such a violent way that I started to rediscover myself. I thought, no, actually, if I'm like this, it's only because I was dating her and she was influencing me every day. And once she was out of my life, and despite everything, I'm the one who eventually kicked her out of my life, all of that just disappeared.
Absolutely. I felt like I should transition, actually. It was not really about like thinking about it. It was really like I should do that because I'm the one, and even doctors were just telling me that I'm the perfect example of trans person. So I was really not doubting that at all. I thought that it's amazing step to do in life, but I was 100% influenced by social media.
I was living during this time in Berlin, And there were a lot of transitioning groups for FTMs there, so women to male transitioning. Usually they were like 10 years above me from their age, but they all were like masculine women transitioning to men. It were like my role models, yeah. So I didn't need like the online stuff. I didn't need any YouTube videos or Reddit or something. I had like the real people in front of me, and they all told me how great it is to have testosterone and how freeing it is to have no breast anymore and to go to the beach without a top. And so I didn't have social media. And
Online, nobody ever said, no, actually, it's not really changing sex, it's just cosmetic. What you'd see on forums or Tumblr was, yes, you'll change sex, you'll be liberated, you'll truly discover what it's like to be a man. And they'd say, doing this will feel amazing, you'll feel so much better in your body. They'd share names of the good doctors, in air quotes, who'd help you transition as quickly and easily as possible. Because otherwise, otherwise that doctor shows you a lot of things. I find it really transphobic, etc. There was always this kind of talk on forums or on Tumblr. Yes,
They did say to me that it's not the same as being born a woman, it's not these surgeries and stuff. They don't do miracles. So they did tell me that, but I feel like everything they said was on a very shallow level. And I knew it, and I told them like, yeah, I know that, but they never went to a much deeper level, And I think that's the main problem, at least in my case, that they also missed a lot of what I now think is red flags because they didn't go to that deeper level.
no, I think I never believed the story to really change the sex, but just to change the appearance for sure. I kind of believed the story like years before there were the butch lesbians, and now they shouldn't be butch lesbians anymore, but they should become men and then be together with their women, and then they're a heterosexual couple. And life would be so much easier. So this was like the main story.
They were telling me that, oh, you will be the beautiful girl that you always wanted to be, and your mother will have a beautiful daughter, and just this stuff. And they were just telling me that when I will transition, that I will be a woman. I was so believing in that ideology. They explained that the bottom surgery isn't the only thing I should or I could change on my life. They were telling me that the operation is not the solution for everything, which I knew. And they were telling me that I'm a woman, but I only have a man's body. It was not explained to me that I have man's body and I'm trying to achieve the woman's one, so I'm trying to modify it. They were telling me that I will be a woman, and I was just living with that I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. And then I just found out that it's just impossible.
The harm that the anti-gender rhetoric creates when it comes from medical professionals or from politicians. We know that this can lead to many suicides, and we don't want our young people to kill themselves, and they have the right to have a life like all of us. For the S&D group, it is gender affirmative healthcare is something which should be the rule in all health settings.
very little. Very, very little. On the forums, there was never anything negative about transitioning or about the complete transition process. I'm talking medications, surgeries, all that. The only negative points mentioned were like, yeah, this treatment might be tough if you're already taking anxiety or depression meds. It was always framed as supposedly well-intentioned advice, like, if you're an anxious person, if you're depressed, if you're on Xanax or antidepressants, it's going to be a lot to handle, but it'll still free you in the end. Maybe you'll even be able to stop those other medications. The conversation always followed that pattern, so no.
I didn't had like practitioner speaking to me about that stuff, because I simply went to one practitioner which one trans man told me to go to, and he simply gave me testosterone. So he first made a blood test and then he asked me if I knew all the consequences. And I simply said yes. And then I got the testosterone. So I never had like this talk like if I really changed sex or not. No, I didn't have this.
They told me that I shouldn't be worried about that because they were really saying to me a lot of times like, oh, don't worry about that, you'll pass, you know, you're gonna look like a woman, that's gonna be fine, don't worry about that. Yeah, so then I started thinking, okay, I started getting these really unrealistic expectations that hormones would fix all this for me, which of course it didn't.
They were telling me that the bottom surgery or just the SRS, that it's an amazing step in my life and that it's just amazing. And I just cannot make a wrong choice because it's amazing. And they were not telling me that I will be more depressed or that just I will be more likely suicidal or just something like that. They just didn't tell me. They just told me that I will be complete. And they were just telling me that the hormones doesn't have any side effects and that is just completely safe, and it's safe for kids and for old people and just for everyone. It's just all safe because the doctors said so, right? They only told me that I need to dilate for like a year. They just told me that they doesn't have any information about unsuccessful surgeries. So they're all successful, everything is great. So now they were just telling me that everything is gonna be okay and everything is okay and that I will be just a beautiful woman and it doesn't have any side effects.
For me, it's like difficult because when I had like the problems, the issues with the pain after the mastectomy, and I still have it on some days, I talk like openly about it because I think it's important to know about it to make the decision if you want to have a surgery or not. And that for me was like really a bit like lying in one other's face when you don't talk truly about what happened to you, which are the negative sides. And yes, this is the thing I really didn't like with the group.
They definitely lied to me, but I think there were a lot of things that I should have known that they didn't communicate with me. Then they told me afterwards, when I already made the decision to detransition, they told me that they were concerned that self-acceptance for me was a big issue, that I struggled with that. And when I hear that, I couldn't believe it because I'm like, how can you, a teenager who you realize has a lot of issues with self-acceptance, how can you let them go on, this path? To me, it sounds ridiculous.
Yes, of course, I was lied. And first, I was just really mad, I was just mad at everyone. I was just feeling like my life is ruined because of them, because I just believed in something for 6 years, and I found out that I was really lied to.
The fight for the trans community to not be stamped as mentally ill, leading to exclusion and stigma, has been long and ongoing. And still, the community is facing more and more backlashes in many member states, but also worldwide. And this is fed by disinformation about the trans community. It's hateful comments that we're seeing everywhere and that are unfortunately also repeated in political arenas and also in this house. I think we can all agree that everyone deserves proper healthcare, no matter their background, income, or gender identity. And that's why I'm very happy we are having this discussion here today. And we know that just accessing proper healthcare can already be challenging, but for the transgender and non-binary community, there are even more hurdles, not to mention very long waiting lists. You should not have to wait for years to get trans-specific healthcare, and it should not have to cost you a fortune to be able to be yourself.
Yes, I regret. I was lucky not to transition physically or take medications. No mastectomy or anything like that. I had this fortune thanks to my parents who stepped in and said, no, actually, you're not going beyond this point. But yes, I still have regrets. If one day someone gives me a button and says, you can erase this from your life and have a normal adolescence, I would press the button.
Yeah, definitely. I feel I kind of got locked in because I had this diagnosis.
Yeah, I regret the mastectomy, but for me, like mastectomy was like a bit traumatizing for sure, because I also had like a after bleeding, so it was like, yeah, terrible.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. I was almost all of my sensation. I cannot have just a normal sex again. I just couldn't study. I will never have kids. And I will never have just the normal life. It will be always more complicated only because I just believed that something like this can help me.
What made me wake up, it was a suicide attempt because I was so miserable in my own body. Back then, I truly felt like an empty shell. I had created this fake appearance and personality, and I'd become someone completely opposite to who I really was deep down.
I only did my facial feminization surgery. I realized for a long time that after these hormones, I had not gotten better mentally. But then I had the surgery and I took it because I thought that I needed to go further in order to actually become happy. I thought I was still unhappy because I hadn't gone far enough. So then I did it. And then after that, I realized that I wasn't happy at all. Things hadn't improved, basically. Also, because with the surgery, also I had a lot of complications and issues. At that point, I kind of started to realize, okay, so when does it get better? You know, if how far do I need to go in order for it to get better, and what if they're gonna get worse? And that was around the same time when I started to reflect on how I grew up in my past and how I felt and who I actually am and all those things. So that I think that combined is what eventually made me realize that I should not have done this.
After the year, I just got completely depressed and I was so suicidal. I was depressed even before, but in the transition, I got more depressed like every day and just heavy depressions, and I just couldn't even just get up out of bed or just normal study or just normal work or just do just normal things. It was not very possible for me, and my mental state gone from bad to worse.
Also, we are very vocal when it comes to defending sex and relationship education, which is in the UN Convention of Children's Rights. Every child has the right of age-adapted, comprehensive sexual education, and this makes them resistant. And they when they hear about other possibilities, they know that they are not sick and that they are normal, that they're just different.
Right now, there are lots of young lesbians and young bisexual women and also like gay men who are transitioning, who actually have a problem with internalized homophobia. And it's actually nowadays a new form of conversion therapy. And it's like really important to open your eyes and look at this problem, because there are all those bills against conversion therapy. But all those young women, they are trying to change their sex to be a heterosexual couple. It's not good for the gay community, and it's like really hurting the future gay community. And when you mean it honestly with protecting gays and young gays for sure, then you should open your eyes and look at this problem.
I was raised in a family where homosexuality is completely banned. That is just something completely just not normal. And then when I found out just trans people, I felt more normal, right? Because I felt just like I'm a woman and I'm attracted to men, so I'm just a normal, just heterosexual woman. Right now, for me, it's just really difficult to just accept my sexuality.
I had a very hard time accepting that I was gay. I didn't want to be gay. I had a very hard time accepting, first of all, my own sexuality, but also just me as a person. I had no self-esteem. I had very little confidence. So there were a lot of factors that contributed to me wanting to transition. In the end, I thought if I transitioned, it would fix a lot of my issues.
I've never gone to see a doctor, clearly, for this sort of thing, since my parents would just give me a flat-out no, really a direct no.
I can imagine some parents maybe thinking, okay, well, we better not talk about this. I think it's very important also to talk to the parents, alone, but I don't think, at least in my case, they didn't do that. And I know for more people that they don't do that. Me being a teenager, of course, I'm not going to listen to my parents, because all the therapists and all the, supposed professionals, they all complied, they all agreed, they all confirmed and affirmed my trans identity. So then if my mother tried to go against that, it would just make me angry, because I would have this feeling like, all these people they are the professionals and they confirm it, and then you don't, but what do you know? It just made me angry. So there was not much my mother could do, especially by basically saying that she was transphobic and didn't want a trans child. They just undermine her authority as a mother, as a parent. So she was just trying to protect me, which every parent does, right?
We also recognize, of course, the realities of trans, non-binary, intersex, and queer people. We indeed push for self-determination and also access to health. We have set up a subgroup for LGBTIQ equality within the high-level group that brings together member states. We also have facilitated projects like Health for LGBTI people, and the idea there is that we want to set standards of health.
It's fantastic that we have a Commissioner for Equality, the first time in the European Union, because Commissioner President von der Leyen says we have to thrive towards a union of equality. And your Commissioner and you working into this direction, and it's very good to have allies in the Commission working on this issue.
You're young, you still have your whole life ahead of you to discover and explore new things. Enjoy the present moment rather than overthinking. Live for yourself as a person, embrace who you are. If you're someone with a strong personality, then own it. But if there are people who love you, who truly love you despite all the stupid things you might do, and they say to you, listen, I think you're going too far here, pay attention to them. Yeah, live for yourself and not for others. Read whatever books you want, but don't watch stuff that's not meant for your age, that's not recommended for you, because trust me, there's a reason for that. Don't live for social media, don't live for TV, live to become the best version of yourself rather than trying to be the best version of yourself for others. Because that's what's happening right now. These days, all young people want to be the best version in other people's eyes and not in their own. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the best person for my ex, for my group of friends. And in the end, I got lost and destroyed myself.
In the end, what I want to say is that, be patient, give yourself time to grow up. It will be different, especially when you get older. People around you will get older as well, and the environment will not be so toxic anymore. As people get older, they will also be more tolerant of differences. It's just really middle school, high school environments, especially for kids that are different and vulnerable, are just not good environments. So I would say just be patient, just get through this and it will get better, I promise.
When you get bullied at school, you should change the school when it doesn't get better. And also, when they tell you all the time, like, you're behaving the wrong way, you're not much woman-like or something, you simply should change, like, your surrounding. Because for me, like, really, the school wasn't good. I think another school form would have been better, and it would have helped me to be more psychological stable. And then the trans story in the end wouldn't have got me so easily.
I want to say that it's completely normal to just be different. When someone just tell you that you're not that you're supposed to be, from their point of view, you're just who you are. Any plastic surgeries will not help with the mental state. If someone just told me when I was just 16 or just 17 that there's nothing wrong with me, it would really help me. And I think that when someone just feel like they could be trans, I always recommend visiting a psychologist, but a good one, right? Not that just a liberal one, but a good one. Yeah, so just be yourself and don't just change everything about yourself to just be happy, because it doesn't work.
So thanks everyone for watching the film. Again, that was by Sophie Robert. It's a very moving testimony. I think we can all agree from these 4 young people who've obviously been to hell and back. I just want to say thanks to Sabeth and Daniel for, first of all, for making the film, for giving their testimonies, and also for joining us here tonight. I think it's not a very easy thing to do. And I also know that from experience in other countries that detransitioners tend to get sort of jumped on and exploited a little bit and maybe used to make the gender critical points, and that's also something that we really want to avoid. But they're very brave kids, as somebody just said in the comments, and yeah, I think they're awesome. And I thank you so much, Daniel and Sabeth, for being with us. Thanks for sitting through the technical hitches as well. This is the first time I've done this with this software. It's not something that I'm very used to, and you can probably tell that we're not well funded by billions in funds and grants and stuff from various organizations. Everyone here tonight is a volunteer. We're freelancing, we all have full-time jobs and other things to do, and we're all here to try and bring this message to the EU, which doesn't seem to have sunk in yet, that not every person who decides to transition is very happy about that choice. This is a message that has not at all penetrated the milieu that we are in, which is the European level, but I hope with this event tonight that we might get that message across. So I'm going to say goodbye now. I'm going to drop out and I'm going to hand you over to our panelists, who are going to be led by the lovely Lydia Daniel, who's going to introduce everybody. So thank you again for joining, and maybe I'll jump in again during the discussion. Enjoy.
Yes. All right. Perfect. I would like to start off with introducing everyone that is here tonight. Let's see. We have Sabeth. Thank you so much for joining us. Then we have Faika. She is the director of Athena Forum. For her, we have also lots of questions tonight. Then Daniel, I see no screen, but if you could let's speak. And there you are. Perfect. Hello, Sean. Good evening.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you. And then we have Dr. Sophia Dechen. Thank you so much. I would like to start off with Faika, because after just watching Detransitioners, a European tragedy, I am extremely worried about how captured these members of the European Parliament are. Can you please tell us more about this from your political background?
Yes, thank you. Good evening to everybody. Thank you for having me. I think this was it is a very important film, and also a documentation of something that clearly, as we could see, the institutions themselves are very ignorant of and arrogant about. And I think what has become clear is 2 main aspects of what compose this machinery that we are up against. One is the echo chamber that they have built around themselves. And the other aspect is the institutional capture. So what we could see, and I thought I found it to be very striking in contrast to the stories of the detransitioners, was the statements made by the politicians. And not only by the politicians, because if you had a closer look at who they actually are, so some of them are politicians of so-called progressive parties, and they repeat a narrative that is given to them either by their assistants who prepare them for these meetings and the hearings and the committees, or that they have as general narrative already within their party. So this is a very general sentiment. It's talking points basically that we can find throughout, whether it's the Social Democrats or it's the Greens. It would be very similar also with the Liberals. So it is this narrative that they are just performing there. But then you also have, you had 2 individuals who were there as co-presidents of an intergroup. It is called the LGBTIQ Intergroup of European Parliament. And it is one of the most influential networks within European Parliament. It has 140 or 150 members who are all cross-party members of European Parliament and who are organized in this LGBTIQ intergroup. That means that they bring together parliamentarians on purpose And they not only feed them with the reports, the statements, the demands that come from the lobby side, from the trans activists, but they also actively liaise with these NGOs. They have events and meetings that they all come to. So this is the environment that they are then embedded in. And of course, the co-presidents or the spokespeople for this intergroup, they have a political agenda on top of the narrative. And then you have a third group, which is the experts that they bring in. So you had an expert there speaking, Silvana Jus, actually, who is now there, or who was present there as an expert. Before that, he was member of the cabinet of Helena Dalli, who was the commissioner for equality, and the whole LGBTIQ portfolio was in her responsibility. Before that, he was working for the Maltese government, and Malta has a very strong influence here and is pushing very hard for gender identity ideology or for trans rights, or has a trans activist position. But before that, he was working with one of the big trans activist NGOs with ILGA Europe, where I myself worked. We were actually colleagues back then. So you have this whole moving through the NGO sector, governments, back to institutions, and then you get an expert status. But you can actually expose them, and you can see that they are carrying narratives in a very, very dangerous way. And so what then happens is that at the same time, embedded in these narratives is that anybody and everybody who opposes this is not only in general harmful or contradicts their position, but is framed as being part of an anti-gender movement, which is equated with the far right. So this is how this whole thinking is established. And then if you have a group that contradicts this, like detransitioners, they are not even recognized. They are completely ignored, denied, and you just hear them come in with their usual talking points. So I think it is possible to have a closer look at this influence. There is a very good report by the OECD that describes this as a policy capture. And this is what has happened within the European institutions, within the European Union, also within the Council of Europe, which is even worse maybe, that this policy capture by all of these elements have to have very, very influential stakeholders, and to have them only from one side. And stakeholders from the other side are absolutely ignored and are not part of this discussion.
Thank you, Faika. That sounds actually really frightening, because if you are already painted off as the bad guy, so to say, if you speak out against this, so how do you propose we could stop this? Or what ideas do you have that we can at least start to engage with the European Union on this matter?
I think one of the first things is to name this and to expose it for what it is, to be fearless. Of course, the accusations of being far right or aligned with the far right are there, and most of us have experienced this ourselves, but to be very clear about it. And we have written a report about how gender identity ideology has actually embedded itself within the European institutions. This report comes out tonight, tomorrow. It's online now already on our website. And I think it's important to know about this and to be able to talk about it, to address it very clearly, and then to demand from policymakers on the national level, on the supranational level, to change this. Because we, from the different positions that we come from and speak from, have to be part of this discussion, and to demand that it's not only experts from the trans activist lobbies that are invited to the roundtables, the consultations, the expert meetings, but to have a broad variety so this policy capture does not continue.
Thank you. Lastly, would you like to tell us something about Athena Forum?
Yeah, so we set up an organization that we're launching now. So tonight, tomorrow, we're launching Athena Forum, which is a European initiative to address exactly these developments that we've been seeing unfold for the past 15 years. It has been, it's very strongly linked to the influence of the trans activist organizations. In Brussels, you have 5 big networks of NGOs who are very influential, and all of them. So one is set up to represent lesbians, and it is talking about lesbians with an asterisk. So it is including men in their definition of lesbians. Another one is a trans activist organization by definition, that is TGEU, a European trans organization. Another one is OII, that's an intersex activist organization that is also basically taking trans activist positions. Then there are ILGA and IGLIO, their youth group, who since about 10 or 15 years actually have pushed very strongly for trans activist demands and positions. And to many from the outside, this might seem like a diverse group of NGOs in a tradition of lesbian and gay rights. And this is one of the challenges, to dismantle this and to show that it is not organizations that stand for lesbians and gays, on the contrary. So the way that the Commission documents or European Union Council of Europe nowadays speak about the rights of lesbians and gays, they use terms like same gender attracted people. So it's a total confusion. It's absolutely unclear what same gender attracted people would even be. It's a dismantling of the rights of lesbians and gays. But this is one aspect of it, but there is a strong influence coming from these organizations. And then you have other organizations, whether it is embedded within the institutions, such as the intergroup, the LGBTQ intergroup, or outside, like there's an organization called EPF, European Parliamentary Forum. It sounds very official and very much connected to European Parliament, but it's actually just an NGO. It's a lobby group in Brussels that gathers parliamentarians from all over Europe, members of European Parliament, but also of national parliaments, and focuses on sexual and reproductive rights and health, but also pushes a trans activist agenda and the narrative of the anti-gender movement, which is supposed to be far right. So once you can address this very clearly and bring it onto daylight, then it becomes you become able to trace their influence, and also to oppose it in a way that demands that to put yourself out there publicly. And this is what everybody who's in this film has done, which takes a lot of courage, because you have to basically then carry it by your person. So we've set up Athena Forum as a European initiative to have this clarity and to have this courage, and to not shy away from addressing all of this, because what happens in these European contexts or European institutional contexts affects us on the national level. So we will then get European Parliament resolutions. It's mentioned in the documentary, whether it's UN level or it's EU level or Council of Europe level, it is taken up and then it is used as an advocacy tool on the national level by either trans activists or by other institutions that follow the same line of arguing and have these positions. One institution is the equality bodies, for example. On the national level, we have equality bodies, ombudspersons. They are organized on the European level in a network called Equinet. And this network has already decided more than 10 years ago to take up strategic casework for trans issues. So they are doing this systematically. It's truly a huge machinery. So it will be very difficult to find either individual positions on the political level by politicians, by commissioners, or by political parties who will be able to ask questions, to be critical, and to involve others in their consultations and in the drafting and deciding on policies and on other measures. And the funding, maybe just to say as a last aspect, the funding, because there is a lot of money, and I'm talking about dozens of millions of euros that go to the NGOs that have a strong lobby established. And on the other hand, you will not get any kind of funding if you're critical of these positions.
Thank you, Faika, and good luck with Athena Forum. We look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
more about that.
Thank you.
Sabet, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I was very much impressed by everything we saw from you in the film, and so I'm pretty sure the audience thought so as well. So thank you so much. Now, in the film, we saw that sexuality played a big role in, eventually being led on this path to transition. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more about what would have made it click more for you to accept your sexuality? What could the environment and maybe especially parents have done in that aspect?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I think for me, the school played a big role in my transition later. Because I think actually my parents couldn't do anything anymore because they were like really accepting. My father always thought I'm a lesbian, and my mother didn't think so, but I don't think they would have had any problems with it. But in the school it was like really difficult because we didn't have any openly gay teachers, no lesbian teachers, and it just was like really a conservative part. And I'm not sure what would have helped me in the end. As I already told in the movie, like changing the school probably would help me a lot, but that would have been it. Yes.
Now, I'm wondering how much of the influence, how much of the group is like online or in school. So for example, if your parents had decided to, well, we're going to move to the complete other side of the country, do you think that would have already stopped the influence of, let's say, the group of people around you?
No, actually, I transitioned later in life. So I transitioned after my school time when I did my apprenticeship in Berlin. And I there met a big group of female people who all transitioned at the same time, but usually they were like 10 years older. And well, it was all in Berlin. So later I moved out of Berlin and I had a different view of things. But just really central in Berlin, it was like all the people I met that looked like similar to me and behaved similar to me, like more being a masculine woman, they all just transitioned. And I was really looking for role models because I didn't have them back in Bavaria where I came from. And that was the downfall for me because I really met great people, but yes, they were all transitioning.
Thank you, Sabet. Now, you've been speaking out about this in the film, and many more detransitioners are coming out. How do you feel about being ignored?
Well, it's not nice being ignored, but I'm now speaking out for, I think, 3 years or something. And for the last year, I didn't do that much anymore because like in Germany, we had to like the law change last year. So now it's more easily to change the legal gender or the legal sex. Well, I wanted to stop this and nobody actually wanted to listen from the politicians in the parliament. Just the Conservative Party sometimes listened, but they weren't the ones that were deciding about the law. So, yeah. I think I got a lot of newspaper coverage and also some television stations were interested. So I think I got some coverage, but it wasn't enough.
And what do you think could have helped from anybody? How can people from your environment maybe still try to stop you or make you see that, or maybe that even if it's just to compromise on, okay, let's wait. Is there anything anybody could have said or done?
Oh, in my past, actually, I'm not sure about it. I think because it was of my traumatic past, I was looking for therapists that could have helped me, and I really didn't find good therapists during that time. And so I decided by my own to start the transition because people were telling me it would be a good help for my psychological well-being, but in the end it didn't help. And yeah, I think I'm not sure what people could have told me, but just some other role models simply would have helped a lot, I guess.
And when you say role model, you mean a role model for a young lesbian, you mean?
I'm bisexual, but yeah, just a more masculine woman who's good in her job, who has a good relationship, and who has a great future. And that would have been great. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Daniel. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, perfect. I have the same question to you, actually. Considering how much accepting your sexuality, how much of a role that played, was there anything that we, maybe as a society, parents, friends, what would you have needed at the time to accept more your own sexuality?
That's a really good question because I found out I'm bisexual and not really just only homosexual, and I married a woman and we're just happily married, and I have a nice life right now. And all I can say is I just needed acceptance. That's just all I needed. And I was bullied my whole life. I was taught that something is wrong with me. I was taught that I will never be a man, that I will never marry a woman. And I just, I felt like it's true. I just felt like all right, I'm just useless guy, so I will become a woman. That was one part of me. And when I saw the happy people that was telling the same things as I felt, then I had just no choice than to transition. But I really don't know what society would or should do to make me not transition, really, because I was so into it. I thought I knew,
And now that you have actually decided to detransition, what would you like to see now? How can we help you?
Yeah, I'm director of NGO in Czech Republic. It's named Based Initiative, and we're helping the transitioners that are regretting their transition and gender changes. And really, I think that the most important part is that people need to be informed about it, and trans people need to have all of information that they can. I think that transition is always a bad idea. Maybe that's a bad bad idea to say, but I just feel like that. I just feel like that you need to accept yourself, not to run away from your problems this way. And I think that people should accept themselves for who they are, and not just to change their bodies, because it will just not help.
Well, if getting people informed is one way to stop this, then I think this film definitely does that, because, as we have seen, everybody really thinks that this is, the best way to go. Now, I have another question, and that is, do you think that detransitioners get enough of a voice in this debate?
In Europe, I don't think so. I really don't think so, because when I speak publicly, there's always people that are telling me that it's my fault, that it's only me, like there's like that transition just doesn't exist and I just created it myself, and it's rude, from them. And I think we need to speak up and we need to tell our stories, because we're not like one of a million, but the transitions are just scared to talk and scared to share their stories because they're ashamed, or they're just scared of the reaction of the public. But I think it's really important. But I think we're doing great, or just better, because progressive parties are not that strong as they were like 5 years ago, or I feel like that. So
Yes, it takes a lot of courage to speak up about this. Now, I would like to ask one final question then. So this organization that you started, can you repeat the name one more time for the people that are completely new so they can learn more about you?
yeah, it's called Based Initiative, and we're the only organization in Czech Republic that really like support the transitioners, because I was told that I'm the only transitioner in Czech Republic, which is a lie. It's not true. And I'm really happy that I can help people, even though there was no one to help me, but I hope we can help others.
Thank you again. It takes a lot of courage to speak out. So again, I would like to express my gratitude to all three of you here tonight. Sean, for you, how did sexuality play a role in leading you towards?
I was never trans-identified. I attended a youth group in Ireland called Belong To. They are an LGBT NGO, and they set up different youth groups for young people. And when I started going there, I was a young teenager, 16, and I had a lot of mental health issues, as did most of the other young people. A lot of my issues came from substance abuse, and I knew I was gay, but I was still, confused about it. But when I went into this group, it was kind of like a training ground for a gender ideology, which made me really like even more confused. So there was one time where a youth worker implied, because I didn't like football, that I might be a woman, and that freaked me out. Because this youth group would be on a Sunday, and on the Saturday I'd be out drinking and doing things I shouldn't have been doing. So my brain would be mush here, on top of dealing with depression, anxiety, and other things. So I was very confused, and then I was really scared. I never felt like I was a woman, but I was really scared that one day I'm going to wake up in my 30s and realize I am a woman trapped in a man's body, and that I should have transitioned at 16, where I could pass as an adult. So that was one thing that I feel like a lot of people there were going through. Most of the young girls there had eating disorders or suffered from autism. They self-harmed, and the young boys just hated their bodies, or were trying to accept the fact that they were gay. And this led a lot of them to really fall into the ideology. So in other circumstances, there'd be people that didn't really understand it that would come into the group, and they'd question it, like, what is non-binary? And the room would erupt in anger and tears, at this person for questioning it. One time there was a young boy who was about 17, who was severely autistic, and he just could not wrap his head around what non-binary meant. And these young people were screaming at him to the point he never came back. He was traumatized. But what I think about that now is, who's to blame? Is it these young people being told this ideology will define their life and they need to fight for it? Or is it the adults in the room who are telling them all of this and trying to, tell them, you need to fight for this, your life is going to be miserable if you don't get trans acceptance, and so on and so on. And they're scared, so they're going to react this angrily. And a lot of these young people have now grown up to be very vocal trans activists in Ireland and in the UK. because they never got out of that mindset, because they're always scared that, you know, we're all going to lose our rights, and they've been sold this lie. And I just find it very heartbroken and very frustrating, and it's hard to know who do you blame for all of this.
So when you came into these groups, I imagine they're very warm and welcoming. But looking back, can you tell me maybe why when you did get those suggestions that maybe you were in fact a woman, what made you not actually believe it? Because you were never trans-identified, yet you were in somewhat the same environment as some or a lot of people actually that do end up transitioning. So what is the difference then? If we're trying to stop children from transitioning, then we need to also look at the people that are in those groups but don't transition. So, you know, so we can tell the difference between those two.
I was very secretive when I was attending this group, but with, you know, my substance abuse and the fact I was going to the group, but I still had a very strong relationship with my family, and I think that gave me the grounding to really hold my ground in my own sense of self, even though I was, you know, still unsure, as most teenagers are, and dealing with my own issues. I think that what held me onto reality was I was always taught to challenge things and to question everything. So a lot of the times in this group, I'd be the one getting screamed at, because I'd be like, there was one instance where there was a man in his 20s. He showed up as a young person. That's another issue with these youth groups. Any man can walk in off the street and they don't vet him. He could be in his 20s and he's allowed to hang around with kids. But one of these days, this man showed up and said his pronouns were Z, them. And I was like, you know, the neo pronouns, the fake pronouns. I just thought it was ridiculous. And I was like, hang on, you know, had an argument with him. Everyone was screaming at me. And I thought, you're all gone mad. Like, it's not that deep. And I think it was little things like that. And especially because I was made kind of an outcast for my little, you know, comments, whether it's about pronouns or furries and adults being there. I think it kind of, I felt more emboldened by it then to kind of question it more, and kind of wasn't afraid to annoy them, I suppose.
Not being afraid to annoy, I like that. Can you tell us maybe a little bit more? Because it seems like there are some serious safeguarding risks.
Absolutely, yeah. The adults is the biggest safeguarding issue. Being able to come in, like, there was a lot of things that went really wrong for other people. In my own experience, I was brought to nightclubs when I was 16 by these adults, and I just thought, you know, oh, I'm cooler than the other people. Like, I'm the one going to nightclubs. They'd buy us alcohol, not within the youth group, I will say. It was off the premises of the youth group, but because the youth group allowed them to come, that's how we met these adults who would take us off then. And there was a few instances where, you know, young boys, you know, bad things happened to them because that was set up. And then another aspect that comes in there is, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So the adults, yeah, obviously that's really, you know, they're coming in, meeting young people, taking advantage of them in one way or another. But then a lot of the information that these youth workers are telling us as well about gender ideology, that's also a safeguarding issue, because a few of the young people would learn something from Tumblr, such as, you know, oh, you can change sex by getting this surgery. Then they'd be telling the youth workers, then that would become part of the ideology. And then that the youth workers, you know, bring it up the ladder to the activists who run the organization. They bring it to politicians and so on. When really it's just like some stranger wrote a post on Tumblr that a 15-year-old girl is taken as fact, and then it kind of goes up the ladder that way. There's no professionals researching this, like no doctors or psychiatrists that are actually like, okay, is this right, is this wrong? Like, I feel like this is how the ideology has become what it is, because the duty to care for politicians, for their people, hasn't been done. They haven't looked and actually paid unbiased, non-activist professionals to do the research, to take out studies, to look at the desistance rate, which is another aspect to my group, Not All Gays. 4 of our members went to this youth group, and out of all the trans identified people we knew there, only 20% of them still identify as trans. Things like that should be, you know, doctors should be doing these studies, psychiatrists, politicians, but they're just not doing it.
Thank you so much, Sean. You're absolutely correct. I absolutely agree with you that more from the medical field should be, speaking out about this, because, if only 20% end up still being trans after so many times, then surely doctors must also see this, psychiatrists must also see this. I mean, if we can, how can we get them involved, and what's their perspective on this? And that's why I wanted to continue to Dr. Sophie Deschênes. Maybe you can shed some light on this from your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And I just want to mention how brave these young people are to speak out. I think it's important to say it, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I'm very impressed, and I hope it's going to encourage other young people to speak out. So thank you to the three of you. So about the medical profession not speaking out, I think people are scared. There's a lot of pressure. It's very difficult, because the less people speak out, the less people dare to speak out, and it's like a vicious circle. I live in Belgium, and there's a conversion therapy ban that was put in place about 2 years ago, I think July 2023. And since then, it's even more difficult, not only to speak out, but to treat people. Because I don't talk about trans identity, I talk about gender dysphoria. So, I see young people, teenagers, sometimes young adults, coming to see me with gender dysphoria. And of course, as a psychiatrist, the first thing I will do is a psychiatric assessment to have a bigger picture, the clinical picture of what's happening. I also try to get all the etiological factors, so that means the causes, basically, that explain the gender dysphoria. And then from there, I'm trying to help them. I've got many ways to help them. I just want to mention that I always work with another mental health professional, because I look after the family, I support the parents, sometimes I do some family therapy. I often have to do some screen detox. That helps a lot. And I work with a psychologist or psychotherapist that will help the patient by himself or herself. It usually takes us, I would say, between 3 and 5 consultations to just stop the patient talking about his or her gender dysphoria. It doesn't take long, because around gender dysphoria, there's a lot of questions about who they are. Of course, they're suffering, so you have to treat the suffering sometimes with medications. Sometimes therapy is enough. But the questioning themselves, they don't know who they are, and just by helping them first to find the questions they ask themselves and then to answer them. So it doesn't take long to stop talking about gender dysphoria. But anyway, obviously it's a very dangerous thing to do as a mental health professional, because of the conversion therapy ban, because people, of course, will call us transphobic when we only trying to help the patient. My opinion, my analysis of the whole ideology, and is that trans identity is obviously, I'm not going to talk about the ideology, I'm talking about what trans identity means to me as a mental health professional. So gender dysphoria is a symptom. You have other symptoms usually associated to that symptoms. You can have depression, you can have anxiety, you can have autism, you can have all sorts of other problems. Trans identity is, for me, would be with a medical language, would be like a symptomatic treatment to a symptom that wouldn't go away. So, but anyway, as a doctor, my aim is to offer my patients a curative treatment. Like when you have an infection, you take antibiotics, the infection goes. That's a curative treatment. If you don't have any antibiotics, then you can give symptomatic treatment, like painkillers, and hopefully the infection will go. But anyway, trans identity is only the last resort, for a person, and it would only be offered to somebody who's able to give consent, and I think that's the most important thing in this situation. You have teenagers, you've got young adults with mental problems. Teenagers with mental problems cannot give consent, and that's all. That's just stop the questioning about giving them, hormones or offering them surgery, because they are completely unable to give consent. So we should just stop talking about transitioning for teenagers and young adults with mental health problems.
Do you maybe also, well, first of all, I would like to thank you for your answer. I have to say, I am very hopeful to hear that actually it is possible to eventually, with treatment, whether it be three therapy sessions like with you, or maybe longer for some people, that there is actually a way to stop talking about this trans identity. Would you like to tell us maybe a little bit more about that? Or maybe, like, a lot of the questions that we are getting from the audience are from parents that are desperate, in a way to get through get through their children. So if there's anything that you would like to tell them.
So I'm just going to explain. So after a few sessions, they stop talking about it. It doesn't mean they don't think about it. I think they still do, and they're still at the back of their mind. But I think we help them enough so that they don't go into transition. And I think that's the most important, because transition is often irreversible. And when you start it, it's difficult to stop. We have different level of transitioning here. And I think some people can stop at a certain level, but some people start taking puberty blockers, and then they'll go on to cross hormones, and then they'll go on to surgery. So our aim is to obviously to make them as better as we can, but it's also to avoid them doing things they will regret, like we have here. I think the two main aspects of the treatment for gender dysphoria is some family therapy, and that's and also on the other side you have the questioning of their identity that is done individually. So these two aspects are extremely important: the family therapy and the individual therapy. I think screen detox is also very important. One of the detransitioners mentioned that it was in the school, and that's more difficult to attend because sometimes people just have to change school. I mean, where I work, I know some schools who have what I call a cluster of trans. And if you get into a trans group in school, it's really difficult to get them out of it. And I think changing school is the only option. And so change school. If it's a screen contamination, you just have to stop them and work with the family to improve the communication with the family in a non-aggressive way, because for these parents, it's extremely stressful. I mean, I can't imagine, what parents are going through. And so improving communication in the family is also very important.
And what actions can you still take when there is such an conversion therapy ban? Because I know that these bans, they're trying to roll them out over different countries in the European Union. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Because we also recently had the law passed, actually, that there is going to come such a ban, although they were actually listening a little bit to the critique. So it's not going to be a full-on ban, like you cannot speak about it at all. But what are you allowed to do, and what are you not allowed to do with such a ban?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm just trying to help my patients. My patients come with symptoms and signs of mental illness, and I'm trying to help them. And I'm being very, honest. But it's most mental health professionals are avoiding these patients because they're scared. So some professionals don't understand anything and just send them to transaffirmative treatments. And some are very uncomfortable because they're scared, because there's a lot of pressure from trans association. And so they send them away, I would say. We have an association that is trying to make politicians react and realize what's happening. As a group, we were trying to make a list of mental health professionals that would agree to take these patients, but we never managed to get a list because every time we ask people, they refuse because they were too scared to be labeled as a practicing conversion therapy ban. So it's actually very difficult in Belgium to find professionals who are ready to try to help these young people.
And can you maybe explain for the viewers that are completely new and for whom maybe this movie was the first time to even hearing about this, why are people in the medical field so afraid to speak out? And what interest could there maybe be involved in, you know, getting people to stay silent about this?
Well, in Belgium, they're scared to spend 3 years in prison, I suppose, because that's what the ban is about. So you know, you just if you are known to be a mental health professional that is not going to affirm the gender, the trans identity, then you could end up with some complaint, and then, you know, I don't know what could happen. So it's a very difficult position.
But can you, for example, like talk about it with colleagues, or is it only towards the outer world, for example? Or is there sometimes, do you think that your colleagues actually might be thinking the same, but that they are too afraid to speak out? And
oh, they do think like me. They agree with me. We can speak openly about that. There's no problem, but nobody will speak publicly. And so they will completely agree with me, but when I ask them to speak out, they don't, because of the risks.
so how did you think that this conversion ban then came through if it was not something that apparently, for example, within your environment, something that everybody thinks? If it's not coming from you, then
I can't really say how and why they ended up passing. Well, I've got my idea, but that was just my opinion. I think, you know, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of money into, you know, trans associations were subsidized a lot, and the lobby is very strong. That's all it is, I think.
yes, the lobby seems to be very strong. That's also what Faika was talking about earlier. I would like to thank you all for coming here tonight and to talk about this on the panel. I think that especially for people that are, let's say, first introduced to this subject, and again, I would like to thank especially Daniel and Sabet for speaking out about your personal experience, and Sean for your courage also. I think it's time to maybe take some questions from the audience, if that's okay, unless there is something that one of you really would like to get off your chest beforehand. Raise your hand, or no? All right, then I'll see if there's any questions from the audience. Yes, so I think somebody says that how much influence did the like individuals have? This is a question to the detransitioners. So how much influence did those people have around you, and then especially the professionals? So was it really that the professionals, once you had, for example, any diagnosis, that they immediately, they never doubted it, they told you, yes, you are trans, and then like that you sort of believed it? Is there anybody that would like to answer that question? Yes.
Well, I had a therapist back in Berlin when I already had decided that I'm trans, and she never asked about it. It was the time I was preparing for my mastectomy. My connection isn't that good. And well, she never asked about it, and we never talked about any doubts. And I don't think that's a good professional way to deal with it.
Thank you, Sabet. I agree with that. Let's see if there's any other question from the audience.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
There were actually loads of questions, and I should have
Yes,
been
that's what I'm afraid was.
That's what I should have been noting them down, but I just want to make my own brief comment before I know Anne-Louise had plenty of questions. A lot of them actually you covered them, Lydia, which are basically like what can parents do to stop it? Was there anything anybody could have said to you to make it stop? You know, what influence have fathers had? All this sort of stuff. I think we covered a lot of that. I think that the reason for this event that we were having tonight is because there's a real disconnect between, you know, this law that comes from above that says no conversion therapy, and then the practitioners like Sophie who are on the ground who are like, you know what, I'm not going to take, well, not you, Sophie, but people who are in your industry, I'm not going to take that patient because I'm afraid of what it means. And I suppose what we're trying to do here is to show the real effects of these high level, highfalutin, ideological, you know, things, ideas that were thunk up in bureaucracies, and then the real effects that they have on the ground. And what I suppose I want to know is like, to what extent is it making it much more, my view would be that it's going to make it way more difficult for anyone to know where to get help in the future. Like parents are terrified. They don't know, like, if I join this Facebook group, am I going to just be surrounded by indoctrinated parents? You know, I admit I join all these groups. I join a lot of Facebook groups that are for parents of trans identifying kids. I join all the groups for trans masked women. I join all the groups for femboys. I join all the groups, and it sounds like an unethical practice, but the reason I do it is because there's no researchers doing it, because nobody would fund that kind of research. And I see like the terror in these groups, like the parents, they, you know, the young women, the young men, they fall into these kind of traps. They fall into these kind of very difficult situations, these sort of, it's almost like a cult. It's very difficult to unentangle themselves from. And they ask for recommendations, but the recommendations are always for the affirming doctor, the affirming surgeon, the surgeon that won't ask questions, the surgeon that will fill in the papers for the insurance, you know, these sort of rules that come from on high, and especially when they come from the EU, because this new conversion therapy ban recommendation is not going to be binding. So we can all sort of just fob it off and say, oh, well, it's not that important. It's just sort of a recommendation. But it does have this filter down effect where countries, when they want to be good EU member states, they'll say, right, we'll implement, you know, a conversion therapy ban. And what you end up with is mental health practitioners who have these people in front of them, parents and kids or whatever, and they just don't know what to say to them. Everyone's sort of lost, except the affirming doctors who are like able to make loads and loads of money. And I just sort of wonder, how you can work within those confines. I don't know, like for the detransitioners yourselves, like, you know, what do we think that these conversion therapy bans are dangerous?
Well, if I can answer, I think they are extremely dangerous because they're going to stop these kids getting the help they need. I mean, that's it. That's a terrible thing that can happen to a country or to a continent. because we saw the difference very clearly in Belgium. Once it was passed, then nobody wanted to be known as, you know, a mental health profession that could help. You know, everybody sent them to the trans-affirmative treatment.
And what's that trans-affirmative treatment? That means somebody who's like usually profit-driven, or just generally in the general health system? Are they like, what's the setup there? Because I just see a lot of for-profit sort of hormone peddlers, and, you know, people.
In Belgium, you have, you know, private doctors who will prescribe puberty blockers, but we have a few centers in Belgium, in universities, who will you know, provide the puberty blockers and growth hormones after one consultation. Actually, when you take an appointment, you can go to see the endocrinologist straight away. You don't have to go and see a psychiatrist or psychologist. You can just go for the endocrinologist. So that tells you how quickly you can get some hormones.
If I may add something to this. So in some countries where you don't have self-ID, the psychotherapists also take the role of being the ones who will give you the statement that you need to transition legally, or they will also be your pathway to social transitioning, or will confirm you on that way. One of the effects, with the chilling effect that this has on the profession, maybe Sophie, you can also tell me if this is something that you see, is that it features in the formation, in the training of young and new therapists, because this is the information that they get about how to treat, how to ethically or at least legally treat in this field. So you might have the older ones that are able to talk about it, at least among themselves, in a different way. But then you have those that come in training and that receive this kind of information through workshops, through conferences, and as part of their formal training also. And now what I also want to say is that this does not even stop on the legal level. So now the push is to have legally conversion therapy bans and so-called comprehensive conversion therapy bans that focus on gender identity and gender expression. If it was about sexual orientation, which it implies, it would not be an issue at all. We would not be discussing. And they want to make it as comprehensive as possible. So we're often talking about minors, children, young people, adolescents, but the actual push is to include adults. The push is to make consent irrelevant. So with children, you could still argue about consent or not, but even for adults, to make consent irrelevant, to penalize or punish with jail time comprehensively everybody who could be involved. So promotion is punishable, but also parents would be punishable. Of course, the therapists themselves, and to have even harsher punishment for anybody who comes from the medical field. And to go beyond that and to have awareness raising campaigns, to have this feature in education, in curricula. So to extend this, to have basically a holistic social understanding of a practice, which is not a practice, it's not happening. I think, Sophie, you explained this very well, how your steps of the treatment that you're taking, but to have a completely different understanding, spread out, rolled out socially, basically your youth group, Sean, your youth group understanding as the standard in throughout schools, youth groups, anywhere in public. So I think, and that is what they're pushing for. And there are petitions to the European Parliament, to the Commission, that outline this. There are positions, statements from NGOs, from the big Brussels NGOs, that make this very, very clear. And the problem is that all of this is being taken up, as I said, either by the institutions such as the Intergroup in European Parliament or others, and also the political parties. They have their LGBTIQ groups. They also have their youth groups. The youth groups often are very intertwined with the LGBTIQ groups. They have their women's groups, which are often completely women with asterisks and so on groups. So totally, and so and they are also part of each political party. So it comes both from the top, but also from within the microsystems. Malta is given as the best example, and just as the politicians in the documentary were saying basically the same thing and using the same talking points, this legislation from Malta is taken and it's just repeated and it's just copied. And the idea is to implement the most comprehensive legislation throughout Europe, at least within the EU countries, where the EU can have some push and some impact. And though they cannot do this yet legally in a binding way, they are looking for ways that they could maybe still do it. And it is high priority. Maybe as last thing, so the president of the European Commission, who is a conservative, Ursula von der Leyen, she tasked the commissioner who is responsible for this with looking into how conversion therapy bans throughout the EU could be made binding. So this is a failure, really, not only by the progressives, but also by the conservatives to understand this issue at all.
We've lost Lydia. She had to run off. So I'm going to take over moderating and I'm going to wrap up the session now because we've had a really nice discussion. Thank you, everybody, for being so patient and kind and generous with your thoughts and sharing everything. I have a final question just for the two detransitioners on our panel. I just want to know why, because we've had experience in the Anglophone world with detransitioners, and the people expect a lot of you, and then you enter this whole other community where you're suddenly exposed to a different set of demands and stuff. And I just wanted to know, why did you agree to participate tonight, first of all, and in general, why are you doing this kind of activism now? Like, what is it that you hope to achieve out of it? Because it would have been very easy just to say, no, I won't tune into your panel and spend 2 hours listening to us talking this evening, and we really appreciate it. And I'd like to know, Daniel, first of all, what is it that made you say yes to this tonight? Like, are you trying to promote your organization? You're trying to reach out to people in the Czech Republic? Like, what's your motivation here? Are we on a rescue mission?
That's a good question. I started just sharing my story only because I wanted to help others. It was the main reason. I felt like my life was ruined. I felt like I have nothing to live for that time. So I thought to myself that I just need to help others, and I was like, if one person will be survived, that it's amazing,
Mm-hmm.
And I was used to being hated, I was used to being called names, so it's like nothing new for me. And I hope we will be able to help others, to just inform people. And I wanted to participate in this documentary just because I wanted to help. That was the only reason.
That's very kind and generous of you. Thank you. And Sabith, would it be the same for you, or is there any other reason?
No, actually, it's like the same. Like, I did the activism like maybe 1 year ago or 2 years ago. Like, right now, I'm not that active anymore in this topic. But I also wanted to talk to people who were in the same position like me, who were like really depressed and anxious, and to tell them that transitioning is not the fairy tale they tell it to be, but that there is, it's not the solution to the problems that I had, and that there are a lot of people where it's the same, because I know now a group of 20 detransitioned women, and we connect and we talk about things. And I wanted to share my experience.
Awesome. And it must make you not very popular among your previous friends, but what can we do?
Actually, the group of the trans men, they were accepting that I was detransitioning. But as I already told, they were like 10 years older. It wasn't that much connected anyway. So, yes.
And as you heard there, Faika has set up this new organization. So on an EU level, I'm not sure to what extent you get involved in, because there's always two levels of this, isn't there? There's the support groups and then there's the advocacy part. So if you're interested in doing advocacy in relation to your European or to your national legislation or whatever, at a European level, there are organizations like FAICA's and LGB Alliance International now has also set up, so that's also awesome. Sean, you have set up your own organization now. You're working mostly on a national level. Are you more support, or are you advocacy, or are you both?
We basically try to run awareness and combat a lot of what the LGBT, set of NGOs are pushing in the name of gay people, whether it's hate speech, conversion therapy, surrogacy, trans ideology. We've kind of tried to make it a double-bladed sword and fight back by saying you can't push these things in our name. Like with the conversion therapy, when you imagine the word conversion therapy, you think of a gay man getting shocked, when it's psychiatrists sitting down with a young girl who's been abused or has suffered a trauma and trying to get to the bottom of it, instead of telling her a scalpel has all the answers, So we're just trying to combat it as best as we can.
Yeah, you're all very inspiring. Thank you so much. And Sophie,
Cheers,
anybody
thanks.
who's listening from Belgium, there are a couple of Belgian groups that have started up. And as we've heard today, there is an EU group. So lots of very inspiring things en route and happening. So I'm going to close this session now. We've had almost 2,000 people tuned in. I think you were tuned in right now. And yeah, it's been wonderful. It's the first of its kind. And I hope that we can have more meetings like this soon. Everybody keep an eye out for all the organizations mentioned. So there's Athena Forum. Sabeth, you don't have an NGO yet, but you will get there maybe one day. No, she's shaking her head. No way. Daniel, yours was what was the initiative? Remind me.
It's a BASED initiative.
Based initiative, very good. And then we have Sean's Not All Gays, and then Sophie Deschênes, of course, from Isomer. And this event has been organized and sponsored by Cry for Recognition, which is a Belgian-based parents group, which are very, very active on the ground. So please get in touch. I'm going to put in the YouTube description of this event afterwards, all the links that you're going to need. I'm Roisin Michaud. I have a Substack newsletter called Peaked. Please subscribe if you feel like it. It's all in English, but I try my best to cover a little bit of everything. So it was so lovely to talk to you all tonight. I'm going to sign off, and you can all give a little wave to the camera and say goodbye, and I shall talk to you all soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you.